Chapter 8. The History of Immigration. Throughout the centuries, people from other parts of the world have come to Denmark. They have settled here because they have been persecuted and have had to flee from their homeland, or they have found a job, are doing research or studying. Both historical and current immigration have left their mark on Danish society. Even though the population of Denmark is comparatively homogeneous, it embraces extensive cultural diversity.
The first large group of immigrants that came here were Dutch. They came in the 16th century and were summoned by the King of Denmark. They settled primarily here on Amager, outside of Copenhagen. The Dutch were skilled at cultivating the land, and they were to supply the king and his court with fresh vegetables.
15 generations ago, my forefathers came here to Amager. They immigrated from Holland in 1521 and were invited by Christian II. He gave them farms to live on in Stormagleby. And Dutchmen were not an uncommon sight in these parts because the Dutch traveled along the coastlines trading, which means that they were not as foreign as you might believe. It was not unusual for Dutchmen to be in Denmark.
Over the course of many centuries, immigrants came to Denmark from nearby countries. At the end of the 1600s, a number of Jews arrived. They fled from persecution in various places in Europe. And in the middle of the 1700s, a large group of Germans arrived. They were called potato Germans because they came to farm potatoes. At the end of the 1800s, a group of immigrants came from Poland. The production of sugar beets required labor, and the Poles were given jobs growing sugar beets. As a result of the two world wars in the 20th century, refugees came from, among other places, Germany and Russia. And during the Cold War, many refugees arrived from the communist countries in Eastern Europe.
Beginning in the late 1960s, immigration from countries further away from Denmark increased. In the 1960s, there was a shortage of workers, and a large group of guest workers from the former Yugoslavia, Turkey, Pakistan, and Morocco came here to work in various sectors, for example, in industry. Throughout the 1980s, during the Lebanese Civil War, the Islamic Revolution of Iran, and the wars in Afghanistan, many people fled to Denmark. Today, approximately 10% of the population are immigrants or their descendants. This has left its mark on life and its daily routines. The Danes have been introduced to new kinds of foods, music, culture, and other ways of living. And the newcomers have had to learn the Danish language and become familiar with Danish norms and culture.
Currently, more and more foreigners are coming to Denmark, and today the majority are coming here to work. Through the years, some immigrants have had difficulty finding a foothold on the labour market and thus to be integrated into Danish society. This has placed immigration on the political agenda and has led to changes in laws and regulations, among others, about spousal reunification. At the same time, it has become easier to come here to work. The majority of the many immigrants who now come to Denmark are therefore employees and EU citizens.
In order to benefit from the opportunities available in a new country, it is important to be open to what society has to offer. This can be a challenge for the individual, and it requires a great deal of openness and tolerance to become part of a new culture. I was 23 when I had to begin learning Danish. That's a little old to learn a completely foreign language like Danish. But fortunately, I succeeded, and I was able to cope with my studies and manage at my workplace. But my descendants, my children who were born in Denmark and who have attended daycare and schools, etc. here, they have a far greater chance of doing well in this society than I've had. Given that they were born here, they are actually Danes, just of Turkish descent.
Godt. Så skal vi lige slette det her grundled, fordi det har vi. Det har vi deroppe. Det er Taha og Andrea.